So hello and welcome to my talk. It's all about housing estates and maps of them. First, it might be useful to give a bit of background information about me. I'm an architect by training, not a map maker, and I worked for many years on public realm projects, so urban and play landscapes, some of which include spaces in and around social rented housing estates. Architects use maps a lot and do their own versions. So we've heard this morning some really interesting mapping done by architects. But I've no doubt that I'm here today, I'm outside my familiar territory, so please do excuse trampling and the kind of feet of an ignorant intruder. I'm also here to learn, so really useful to get your feedback and insights on what I'm doing. So, the early interest I had in both maps and estates fed into my current research projects, examining the use of maps by the London County Council, pioneer of housing estates, the appropriation of landed estate maps styles to popularise edge of city estates as complete places in their own right. The work has also explored the post-war organisation tours of housing estates, which emerged from the government's involvement in the Emergency Economic Committee for Europe in 1945, which is a forerunner of the Economic Commission for Europe. Its aim was to support post-war reconstruction through the sharing of knowledge and resources on construction methods. The tours were organised by the London County Council with inquiries directed from the Ministry of Health and the British Council. I've been creating maps, actually, of the journeys taken by some of the tours. You can see bottom left, which involve delegations from across the globe, including many from colonial nations. This work and the evidence emerging from it suggests that practices of estate creation and management, that would include maps made of estates in this, shape estates to be physically distinguishable territories. This brings me to the focus of this talk on how estates get mapped or not. In the 2025 mini-series on Netflix, Too Much, anybody seen that? Oh, one person, yay! I managed to watch the first episode. The lead character, Jessica, relocates to London after a cinematic tour from Heathrow via the West End sites. The taxi deposits Jessica outside Hoxton Grove Estate. To her surprise, not a salubrious gated estate of her imagining, but a plain old council estate located in the London Borough of Tower Hamlets. Chosen no doubt from filmhub.co.uk's extensive back catalogue of housing estates. Just as well, but Jessica went by black cab. Neither the fictional Hoxton Grove estate nor the real St. Peter's estate are actually named as a feature on any map. She would, however, have been relieved to see a map of the estate at its perimeter. This is the estate signboard, a familiar addition to the streets of many UK cities. If we define estates as land under single ownership or management, we can see a picture of an urban landscape as dominated by them. This is just a section of land north of King's Cross. Some legacy, some very much in the ascendancy, as with the so-called King's Cross development, which is here. These are the estates surrounding our St. Peter's estate. They include developer-led and managed estates, housing association owned and managed estates, and former council estates that remain in single ownership and management with leasehold arrangements. My research has mainly focused on London and in particular historic signage in an attempt to trace the history of this practice. But estate boards exist across the UK in different forms. They typically found at the perimeter of an estate and include housing blocks, roads and pathways, and all the community and social facilities to be found with it. So we have examples down here, rural Wales, Newcastle, and when we go on holiday, I look at the estate signboard, so it's Penzance. Signboards are not limited to council, public or social housing. These examples are from commercial developments where the estate management includes place stewardship and curation, a kind of managing not just of the built environment and fabric, but of the estate's success as a distinct and refined urban destination. And so to the map itself. Here we have an early sign from the 1960s on the left and one from a recent estate redevelopment. A representation focuses on the estate interior, uses white space to emphasize separation from the world around it, and uses this space to locate a key, often using idiosyncratic or unintuitive colours like blue for buildings and so on. Roadways or tone often emphasise the extent of the estate, or there might be a hard outline around the edge. As touched on earlier, my research has involved an exploration of the housing estate as a current manifestation of a long tradition of estate creation and management, from the estates of the landed gentry to the management of colonial properties, through to the development of existing estates for housing in the late 19th century. The focus has been on common practices of estate mapping and management, and in particular, the celebrated estate map as a means to display wealth in pictorial form. With the effective municipalisation of the idea of the estate in the early 20th century, you see many of the examples of the features of the estate being redrawn, emphasising the housing estate as a complete and self-contained community. In this example, the London County Council purchased the estate of the Blackwell family seen on the left. They're the Blackwell family from the Cross and Blackwell family fortune. The estate was formerly owned by W.H. Smiths, the newsagents. Now, in order to create the South Oxford estate depicted here on the right, in a book celebrating the achievements of the council, the LCC, and in this case, Walter Seagull, redrew the map in the form of a kind of estate map. The estate, complete with social facilities and schools, stands in isolation from neighbouring housing, Carpenter's Park on the right and Watford just to the north. Also from the London County Council, we have the map included in the Tenant's Handbook for the Becontree Estate in the centre. With a few more flourishes, we have Lang's estate map of their developments in Cannons Park in northwest London. In a series of 3 maps produced in the late 20s and 30s, the London County Council began to depict their so-called out-county estates in more pictorial form, emphasising its appearance as a self-contained unit despite lying on the edge of suburban London and comprising individual yet matching blocks of dwelling in the style of earlier estate maps. Estate planners and architects drew from debates about the nature of social life in the city and took the position that the neighbourhood could be used as the basis of urban planning. The neighbourhood unit became the basic building block of planned growth and involved consideration of the design, social makeup, and the requisite community facilities to engender belonging and the good life. The great concern was that the new estates would be without community and thus without soul. The idea that each estate should have a thriving community with its own community centre was at the heart of the work of the NCSS's New Estates Community Committee. And we have an example here from the States of Clarence Perry's vision of the neighbourhood unit. In order to physically manifest these ideas and to reflect the mapped vision of the neighbourhood unit, if you like, estates were designed to be self-contained. These are examples emerging from the post-First World War Homes for Heroes plans as laid out in the Tudor Waters committee report. Raymond Unwin.
You're simply going too fast, you can't. I was halfway through reading it.
Sorry, I can send you the slides.
You're going very fast.
Shall I? Do you want to go back?
Yes, one. Yes.
One, okay.
I'm actually interested. That's fine, you can go ahead now.
Okay, thank you. Raymond Unwin, key author of the report, the Tudor Waters Committee report, drew ideas from Ebenezer Howard and the writings of Morris and Carpenter. who viewed the pre-industrial vision of the village as an ideal form for community cohesion. The OCC promoted wholesome activities to its tenants with guides to gardening and so on. Am I okay to go on? I'm worried about the timer here, down here. 10 minutes ago. Thank you. The idea of the neighbourhood unit also, as an organising principle, also formed the basis of Second World War planning, as can be seen here in Carter and Goldfinger's summary of the Abercrombie County of London plan, which was published sort of like for the general public. This is the front cover showing London as an island with its own white cliffs. The idea of the neighbourhood unit was also taken up in the Dudley Report, 1944, Design of Dwellings. In addition to informing the plans for the out-county estates, overspur and expanded towns, and of course the government's new towns programme, the concept of the neighbourhood unit also shaped slum clearance and slum building, estate building within cities themselves. So on the left, top left, we have the legal maps for the compulsory purchase of property and the extinguishment of rights of way, which are shown in pink. So these are roads that were not going to become part of the new estate, and they needed to be blocked up. So these are the maps, the legal maps showing those. On the right is an excerpt from the set of OS maps kept by the London County Council and the Greater London Council, onto which new road layout changes and new street and block layouts were marked up, presumably then to go to the OS for marking on their maps. That wasn't clear. So we can hear in pencil the new blocks. Often the estate road names were indicated, sometimes they weren't, so that's possibly why they subsequently didn't get marked on maps with their names. The 1951 Festival of Britain featured an architecture exhibition in Poplar. This is an early map, again indicating the idea of the neighbourhood and the neighbourhood unit. And this is a kind of popularised version for an exhibition that was done on the site, and it was called the Lansbury Estate. Early estate signboards drew from the modernist language of the display board that we can see on the left and the right above to create the early estate signboards that we see today. The architect Ernest Goldfinger, his wife Ursula Blackwell, the same Blackwell of the Blackwell estate, weirdly, illustrator Sheila Hawkins, and the landscape architect Paul Shepherd, who was involved in many of the new towns in terms of landscaping. They created a set of 20 display boards for the Army Bureau of Current Affairs, telling the story of post-war reconstruction. These were one of many packs of boards that went out to serving troops fortnightly as part of lectures that will be given. And they've been credited with shaping voter expectations that led to the 1945 Labour landslide. The visions drew on the idealisation of the village as a natural unit of urban development and as the basis for the neighbourhood unit. And the pack tells the story of how each element of daily life will be catered for. This is the finalised scheme. It's actually Haggerston in London, but it's fictionalised in the boards themselves. So before we go on and look at how estates appear on maps, I'd like to share this one. This is a particularly extraordinary sign from the 1960s, commercial development by Waits in Bromley in South London. The sign was designed by a German emigre, F.H.K. Henrion. He was one of the 20th century's leading graphic designers, responsible for many examples of corporate identity, including the Tate & Lyle logo, which still exists today, KLM logo, which still exists, and the National Theatre. As a designer involved in the war effort, the Britain Can Make It exhibition of 1946 and, of course, the Festival of Britain in 1951, Henry would have been part of a circle of friends and professional associates, including Goldfinger, and most likely the signboard graphic designers at the London County Council. This design features voids between the metal framework, thus merging the road layout with the landscape beyond. Note that the Elms, which is the name of the estate, is only recorded on this sign and in Company's House with the residents, registered company. On the map, it's Rosemore Gardens, which brings us to the question of how a visitor would get to the Elms if they were trying to find it, because it's not on any map. So, these are examples of street finders used by local councils and published by local councils, often based on Ordnance Survey data. I think the one in the middle uses OS data. And then they've added features of local interest. So estates don't appear on these at all. The supposition perhaps that estates are not places that those with mobility would want to visit. So why would you need to visit an estate if you were visiting the borough? And those living on estates are those with the knowledge of their neighbourhood, and they would not use such a guide. So this question of neighbourliness and the keeping closer to their own districts is something that planners at the time talked about as a facet of working class life, that neighbourhoods existed for working class people and not for those with greater mobility. So where estates are described, as in this example from the RBKC guide, so these are just pre sort of internet, like 1990s, pre sort of Google Maps and so on. We have the World's End Estate in Chelsea. It is only facilities required by those from off the estate, such as the school and the church, that are described within it. All the pedestrian streets on the estate are all missing. Tower blocks. Grenfell on the left and the Trellick Tower, the famous Trellick Tower on the right. Useful visible landmarks from off the estate are also shown, whilst omitting the rest of the estates of which they are part. These are early A to Z maps drawn by their own cartographers. Rather than using OS map data, they involve a limited language of street, name and sort of edge. And they draw a blank when it comes to indicating what an estate might look like. But later maps we do get, like this 2012 map, we get estates being shown in a single tone. And we also get the streets being indexed and the estate name being indexed. So for the first time, an estate dweller could find themselves on a map and they could direct others to where they live. And by 2014, and this is a super scale map of London, we have an even more developed visual representation, including blocks and public spaces between them, as well as estate names and block names. So it's great, it's really great. And on the left we have the Barnsley estate in Islington, showing all of the individual buildings and the streets between them. And on the right we have the Golden Lane estate in the City of London. However, the road map, this is Collins, no, it's the AA road map, sticks to just marking roads, and where we do have roads within estates that are drivable, then they're also indicated. So we've seen how popular online maps like Google and Apple omit estates, but other digital spaces have become destinations for those keen to record the presence of estates and information about them. This is a Wikimapia, and it's a record of public housing estates in London. Lots of different categories there to allow for different types of estate. Thank you. Volunteered information nature of the site allows for uploads of estate history and lived experience, as in here, records of the fortunes of a Glasgow estate. But of course the sources are unverified and the recording of the information is quite unsystematic. Map allows visual information to be included, so amusingly this one we have an estate signboard being recorded along with the estate. So we have, this is an example of New York and housing estates in New York and Paris. And So obvious issues with Wikimap here, like ownership and so on of the data. Here we have OpenStreetMap, where estates are not mapped as a rule, though it's possible somebody here has actually mapped the Golden Lane estate. And there are discussions on the blogs as to how to map a housing estate when it's, is it a neighbourhood, is it a type of housing tenure, or is it a separate type of land use, or is it just a social construct? So over the past decade, we've had estate renewal and regeneration programs. They've raised existential questions about the estate and grounding concepts of neighbourhood and belonging. Many estates continue to be owned and managed municipally. We have housing associations and other non-profit housing providers taking over. We have estate regeneration projects that involve partnerships with developers, where the whole estate might be retained, sold off, or partially sold off. Range of scenarios is complex, but invariably the freeholder will retain ownership of the estate as a whole in some form. Reading the estate sign provides an insight into the impact of these. So top left, new housing. This is an estate that was densified, so by adding additional buildings. Here, the council have recreated the estate signboard. They've added the additional buildings, which include housing for commercial rent, market rent. They've also, in changing the estate, they reinforced estate boundaries and perimeters, and they resisted an attempt to rename the estate into gardens rather than red brick estate. Bottom left, early signs showing new developments on an existing estate. You have to rotate that sign through 90. So this was new buildings built on an existing estate. They created a new estate map just for the new buildings for commercial, for market rent. And then subsequently that sign has been taken down, and they've created a new sign that includes all of the existing social housing, the housing at affordable rent, and the housing at market rent. And they've made a signboard in the tradition of the estate signboard. They've put a very thick perimeter around it in black, which is quite interesting. And then we have another, I won't go through that one, but it's a sort of quite complex idea about creating two estates out of one. So, yeah, just to conclude, something of a long view. The estates have explored, traced back their practical genesis, and I think their sustained existence to the ownership and management of land. So that kind of what it comes down to. However, I think estates embody broader cultural values about how we sustain an authentic vision of community in the face of change in our urban environments. And this is sort of patches it for me. Vita Sackville-West's poem "The Land" from 1933. The estate remains a romantic alignment of community, neighbourhood, and enclosed territory, and its map speaks of the desire to make a bounded place in which to belong. Thank you. And apologies for the